A couple of weeks ago, I asked you guys on Instagram and on my community tab here on YouTube if you were in the mood for or looking for any particular books that I could recommend to you. I had some videos to put up before then. I will leave those linked in the description, so I'm only just getting around to filming it now, but I have some book recommendations, so let's go. First we have Jacqueline, who asked for Family Saga, Dual Timeline, Maybe Irish, which to me sounds like The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. It's the only thing that I can think of that kind of fulfills that brief. But there is a good chance you've already read that one, so I'm sorry about that. There will be some more family sagas in a minute though. The Bee Sting follows a well-to-do, middle-class Irish family who have fallen on harder times than expected because of the financial crisis and the fall of the Celtic Tiger. It is told from the perspective of the mother, the father, the brother and the sister, each of them who are hiding things from one another, whether that is the past of the mother or the financial situation of the father, the daughter who is rebelling and she's doing her leaving cert and trying to come to terms with who she and becoming aware of who she is and what her future may hold, and the younger brother who has got involved with potentially unsavoury characters through online gaming. This is a really brilliant big long family saga that follows this one family, although it's not a family saga in the many generations sense, just in the sense of a drama that contains a family and is quite large. But we follow them over the course of a year, I think, as these secrets and histories and lies unfold, and it is told with a great deal of humour, dark, witty humour, but humour nonetheless, and with really brilliant, vibrant, voicey characters that I think will definitely stick with you. And I think it's a book that most people will enjoy because it's funny and thrilling and smart and well written, and definitely ramps up the tension as you go along. Jacqueline also asked for some new releases of later this year. I haven't actually read anything that's coming out this year before it's come out, so I can't recommend you anything necessarily, but I did recently put out a video about books that I'm excited about that are coming out in July, August and September, so there might be some there that might tickle your fancy. Next, Caroline asked if I knew any writers from Chad or Niger whose books had been translated into English. I suppose because I used to do a Read Around the World challenge, you thought I might know this. But unfortunately, Chad and Niger are not places that I have read from. I did a little research, and the ones that came up, because Chad and Niger are both francophone countries, most of these writers publish in French, but the ones that have been translated into English that I could find is the Epic of Askia Mohammed, which is by Nuhu Malio, and that is who is from Niger. And this tells the story of Mama Kasai, who ruled the Songhay Empire between 1493 and 1528. So I think it is historical fiction. Potentially it is non-fiction. I think it's fiction though, it seems to be. And it was translated by Thomas Hale. So hopefully that will be of interest to you. And then from Chad, the writer Nimrod has a selection of his works translated into English as well, which was translated by Frida Ekoto. So hopefully you enjoy those. I can't vouch for them because I have never read either of them, but they are the only ones that I could find. They might be quite difficult to find the actual books of though, I'm not sure. Then Gossip Girl asked for a classic with a young female protagonist, agnostic on setting and time period. So I'm going to assume that you have read the well-known classics, Little Women, What Katie Did, Anne of Green Gables, that are all of young women during this time period. And I'm going to recommend a couple that I have liked. So we have Wolves of Willoughby Chase by Joan Aiken. This is the first in a middle grade series, I guess we would say now, a childhood series. And it is set in England in, I think, the 19th century, but it is as if the Jacobins had won. England is a Catholic country, ruled by Stuarts still, and wolves also still exist in England. And it is about a young girl who goes to Willoughby Chase, this strange house where her cousin lives, and they become friends, but their parents aren't there, and there is a housekeeper, governess kind of woman who's in charge of them. But there's this boy who is in charge of the geese, and they try to escape from this evil woman who is taking over the house while the parents are gone. And it's really a lot of fun. I remember really enjoying it when I read it as a middle grade aged person. I think I was 10 or 11. I haven't read it as an adult, but it might be just what you're looking for. Another one that has some younger people, some slightly older people, is The Makioka Sisters by Junichiro Tanizaki. And this is a classic from Japan. Do we still have it? Yeah, here we go. Here we go. I read this as the first book in my big book club with Matthew Sharapa. I will leave linked in the cards above our live show where we discuss this. This translated by Edward G. Seidensticker, this one. And this is kind of Japanese Little Women, only in the sense that it is about 4 sisters in Japan in the 1930s, from this noble family who are falling on hard times, kind of slightly financially. And the eldest sister is married and the other 3 sisters kind of need to get married. So I guess there's a Pride and Prejudice feeling there. But it is kind of a family saga. We go through them over the course of the years as they fight and resist one another, and also the experience of Japan at this time period. The kind of empire building is kind of in the background. And it is a really kind of lovely, fun book, really fun read with a lot of like epic things happening, like there's floods and illness and things like that. But I think it has, if you like those books, I think that this one will work for you. Then I said that we would have a family saga again, and Art Books Places asked for a family saga. Now, I know there are like 2 different types of family saga. One is like a very long book that deals with a family and their interactions and relationships with one another. And then one is a similarly big long book that deals with generations of a family and the way they interact with history, and has much shorter snippets with each section of the family rather than the whole book dedicated to the immediate family. My preference is the former, the immediate family, rather than the stretched out latter, because I like the time you get to spend with those characters. So that's what I'm going to be recommending. I don't really have any recommendations for the more long time period kind of book. On Beauty by Zadie Smith, which tells the story of 2 families actually. One of whom is a family where the father is a art historian from England and the mother is a nurse from Florida, and the father works at Harvard. And the eldest son, Jordan, has travelled to London and met with an art historian who is their father's kind of rival, his mortal enemy, who is a black Caribbean man who's working in London but then moves to Harvard as well. So we have the rivalry between the 2 fathers who are art historians, but the oldest boy, Jerome, I'm pretty sure, falls in love with the daughter from the other family. She's kind of indifferent to him. But then we also have the daughter, whose name is Zola, and the son, Levi, and they're all in different ways dealing with this feeling of being an outsider, being mixed race children, having grown up in the UK and then now being in America, being from the ivory tower as opposed to being like working class. Their father grew up working class but is now in the ivory tower, and their mother grew up well-to-do but is now a nurse. So there's like all these machinations of class and things. It has Zadie Smith's humour and sort of wry look at things, and it is a book that kind of meanders. The plot is not the central part, but it is very well written and I really enjoyed it. We also have The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver, which is about a family of missionaries in Congo in the 1950s who get swept up in the Congolese fight for independence, and it explores the damaging ideas of colonialism and how that interacts with missionary work and the violence of that, as well as the violent misogyny of evangelical Christianity and the CIA involvement in the death of Patrice Lumumba. So there's a lot going on in this book, but it is so viscerally, beautifully told, so really immersive and really wonderful read, and yeah, definitely I think you would enjoy it. It covers like decades of time and these 4 daughters of this missionary and his wife as they grow up in Congo as well at the time period. Another one is The Promise by Damon Galgut, which again follows 3 siblings after the death of their mother in South Africa. And when the mother died, she promised their black servant the house in which she lives, and that's the promise, is that that has been promised, but the ways that all of the family fail to uphold that promise over the course of the decades in which something important happens in each of the time periods in the life of this family, and it also ties in with an important period in South African history, whether it is the release of Nelson Mandela or the corrupt presidents in 2012. Jacob Zuma, is that right? It is Jacob Zuma. And this one is told in a really interesting way where it drifts in between first, second and third person. And I enjoyed the way it explored these themes in South African history. And then also The Old Drift by Namwali Sapel. And this one is a more traditional family saga that starts in 1901 and ends in 2025, I think. So that's now, although it was published 6 years ago, I think. And it follows these three men, one of whom is Zambian, one of whom is British, and one of whom is Indian, in Zambia in in 1901, an incident that connects them all, and then they go back, the two of them go back, and then the ways their families re-engage in Zambia over the course of the decades, following Zambian history from colonialism to the fight for independence and off into the future, looking at medical colonialism, neo-colonialism, techno-colonialism in the future, again with a lot of humour. If you like Zadie Smith, I think you'll like Namwali Sapel. And Arts Books Places also asked for good essay collections. I haven't read a huge amount of essay collections, but I will forever recommend Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. It has a lot of her well-known essays in it. The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House, and Poetry is Not a Luxury, as well as her diaries when she travelled to the Soviet Union in the 1970s. Writing to a white woman, a white mother. She's just a brilliant academic, a black lesbian feminist academic from the middle of the 20th century, and she is just such a sharp, incisive writer, really engaging, really interesting, so definitely one I would recommend. Then we also have Islands of Abandonment by Cal Flynn, which isn't technically an essay collection, but each chapter deals with a different part of the world in which people have abandoned the landscape and the way that nature reacts to that or interacts with that, whether it's the DMZ in Korea and the one in Cyprus, or the places where, like, a slag heap from an oil refinery, the way that nature has reclaimed and regained, and the ways that we can learn from that in order to improve the ways that humans have destroyed landscape. And I think this one, again, was really beautifully wonderful. This was really beautiful nature writing. And as each chapter is kind of not really connected by content, although it is connected by theme, I think you can read it like an essay collection. Then Valerie Rules 12 asked for a coming-of-age story starring a woman in her 30s, which is an interesting concept because when you're in your 30s, you have come of age. You can deal with issues and you can learn about yourself as a person, but I believe you can't really come of age. You've already come of age. I say this as a woman in her 30s. So I'm not sure coming of age is quite how I would describe any of these, but it is women in their 30s grappling with identity and themselves. We have Trespasses by Louise Kennedy, which is, I think that she's in her 30s, and this is set in Belfast in the 1980s. This woman is a teacher in a Catholic school in a supposedly integrated community, and she also works in a pub, her father's pub, although he has died, which serves, although they are Catholic, serves mostly Protestant clientele. And in that pub, she meets a man who is a human rights lawyer, is married and is a Protestant. And they get into a relationship, and it explores the intimate ways in which the Troubles affected people, their close lived experience of people who weren't actively involved but were actively affected. And it is really beautiful and moving, although it goes where you are expecting it to go. Then there is also The Yield by Tara June Winch, which is about a Aboriginal Australian woman who travels from London back home because her grandfather has died, and she is confronted with the reasons that she left and the life that is back there, and the mining company trying to buy her family's land. And at the same time, she discovers her grandfather was creating a dictionary of Wiradjuri words, because they are Wiradjuri people, and he is trying to hold on to the language that has been lost. And he tells a story as the definition of each of these words. And there is also a diary from an earlier time period of a residential school. And so it is about the treatment of Aboriginal people in Australia across the decades, from the residential schools through her grandfather's experiences, and the ways that language and way of life and everything was removed, and then the mining company now, trying to take what little is left. And I think she's coming to terms with who she is and where she's come from and the effects that that has on her. And then also Stillborn by Guadalupe Netto. I'm not sure where I've put that, but this is about two women who meet in their 20s and decide they never want to have children, and they build a friendship based on that. And then when they're in their 30s, one of them changes her mind and has a child, but this child, she is told, will not survive long out of the womb. And it is about motherhood and mothering, our main character's relationship with her mother and also with her friend, and that idea of making a decision, a time-limited decision, and the effects that has on relationships, and also duties of care, and the ways in which we must care for one another. Really beautifully written, kind of harrowing, thought-provoking, wonderful little book. Alexandra Jovanovic said, as I live in a time of rebellion in my country, I need a novel that will give me hope for the just victory of people against tyranny. Now, I am sorry that you are going through that, I hope, for a just victory. I do not know if I read many books with a just victory over tyranny. A lot of the books I read seem to be fairly pessimistic about that, but Free by Leah Upi may be an interesting book to read. Not so much about justice, but about the dangers of ideology on any side. It is about Leah Upi's experience growing up in Albania under Tito? Under the communist dictatorship, where the country was closed off, and not realising that she is the granddaughter of the king, or the prime minister in when it was a constitutional monarchy, and so she's like enemy of the people. And so there's a lot her family don't say to her, a lot of things she doesn't know as she's living through this country as a child, and then slowly gets to learn things as the freedom as Albania comes out of communism, and the way that the capitalism coming into the country was not necessarily a growth of freedom for them. So the two different opposing ideologies, the damage of both of those things on her country, and trying to have conversations as she travels outside of her country as well for education with people who do not have the experiences that she has. It's a really well-written book, a really thought-provoking one, and a really intimate family portrait set during a time of repression. So that might be interesting, if not triumphant. And then there's also Glory by No Violet Bulawayo. And this is a political satire, animal allegory of the Zimbabwean political system, where all of the characters are animals. And it is a kind of a satire of the coup against Robert Mugabe in 2017. So there we have the tyranny of Robert Mugabe, but the dangers of political coups and military dictatorships that can often follow them. So again, not quite triumphant, but violent and brutal, but funny and engaging. It has a feeling of folktales or folklore, I think, because all of the characters are animals. For me, it read not so much like Animal Farm, but Aesop's Fables, and I enjoyed that. And it looks at the way that things turn, the way that what is expected is not always what happens, the difficulty of freeing yourself from tyranny. So I don't know if any of these will be uplifting, but certainly engaging. Ms. Super Amazing said, I'm really into femgore now. Would love some recommendations for female protagonists in a body or psychological horror. The one I will always recommend, if I can find it, not that one. Although this, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace to the Sea by Mishima is a psychological horror, but it's all boys. So, good book, but not what you were looking for. Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Cooper-Smith. This one is set in Vietnam over 2 time periods. We have a girl who is Vietnamese American and travels to Vietnam to teach English as a second language, and the apartment in which she lives has a sinkhole in it from which weird things are emanating. And then also in the 1980s, a girl goes missing. She has 2 male friends and they live in a small mountain rural town, and they get involved into various scrapes and things. But it starts with a man who's been called to a town because there is a ghost haunting them from their well, and he detaches his jaw to eat the ghost. And the body horror in this is really, really gruesome and wonderful, and I think it's really great, and it does have female protagonists, and it is Thrilling, witty, disturbing and righteous, apparently. Definitely witty and thrilling, and I loved it, and this really got me into that kind of femme gore genre, so I hope you would enjoy that. And then also, you may have already read it, but Our Wives Under the Sea, a much more slow, melancholy, not at all thrilling, but definitely body horror, about a woman whose wife went on a submarine expedition and returns home changed. She never wants to leave the bath. And there are some really gruesome body horror things in this, and also kind of the vibe of catabasis, not the book, the concept of a submarine expedition as a journey into the underworld. I love that book, so atmospheric, and it made me cry, which is not necessarily what you expect from horror. Jorvik Reads asked for something languid and summery set in the Edwardian or interwar period. Well, I am always going to recommend A Room with a View. A Room with a View by E.M. Forster, and this is set in the Edwardian. This is the quintessential Edwardian merchant ivory film of a book. I think there is a merchant ivory film with Maggie Smith and Helena Bonham Carter, but it is about a girl called Lucy who is from a middle-class family in the south of England, very sort of staid and composed and English, and she travels to Florence with her maiden aunt as her chaperone, and they go to stay in Florence in a pensione where there are other English people, and she becomes acquainted with this working class man and his son, and with the passion and freedom and violence and love of Italy, and the release from the repression of England. It's a classic for a reason. One that I read more recently, Days of Light by Megan Hunter, starts off in a Easter garden party in 1930s with a girl who is just 19 and her brother who is returning home from Oxford or Cambridge, bringing with him his girlfriend for the first time to meet the family. And they are a family of eccentric artists and academics who are, separated and in relationships with other people, but our main character does not feel like she quite belongs there. And it has it's not quite summer, it's Easter, but it has a really great atmosphere, and it definitely feels like those Victorian or interwar period classics in terms of the atmosphere. It does go further across history into the Second World War and the 1960s, but it begins where you were saying, and it's definitely a languid, atmospheric book that focuses on light and God and purpose and love. There's a lot going on about whether one should leave oneself up to the world of faith and the intangible and meditation, or whether one should stay in the real world grounded with people. And I'm not a religious person in any sense of the word, but I enjoyed the book. And also Still Life by Sarah Winman, a motley crew in the 50s and 60s, this time in Italy. The perfect languid summer found family book about a man who was stationed in Italy during the war and saves a man's life and ends up going back to Italy after the war, bringing with him the entire contents of an East End London pub, including the talking parrot. Just a really beautiful, wonderful, fun book that I think has the perfect languid summer vibes. Then over on Instagram, Reluctant Reader asked for litfic with a sense of humour. I would say Summer Light and Then Comes the Night by Jon Kalman Stephenson, which is a series of internet-connected short stories that start off in the long Icelandic summer and then travel to the darkness of winter and back out again into summer. This is if your sense of humour is whimsical, absurd, slightly dark and brutal, and you don't mind a touch of the surreal, the magical, but not quite confirmed that. A land where people believe in elves, for example. A place where someone pokes holes in his ceiling to mirror the constellations he sees outside. There is darkness, brutalness. It is about living in a small town where everyone's watching you and everyone knows what you're doing. The surveillance of that and the limitations and weirdness caused by it as well. Or Lost on Me by Veronica Ramo, which is about a woman. It's again absurd, silly, witty, dark, brilliant little book about a woman who lives in Rome with her family and who is the girl is called Veronica as well. It is auto-fiction. And she lives, her father's constantly putting up new walls in their house to create new rooms, so things are getting smaller and smaller. And so that's the kind of absurdity in this book. But it is so funny. Her relationship with her brother is hysterical. It carries on over the years, and we slowly unfold the secrets of the family, the grief that she's feeling, the reason that she's writing this book now. All of those things are unfurled in this really humorous way, from the perspective of this young Italian girl who wants to be a pop star. And I really, really loved it. Then Bookish Bell asked for something similar to Throne of Glass, and I think you have perhaps come to the wrong person to ask this question. I rarely read fantasy. I've never read Throne of Glass or any Sarah J Maas book, so I don't know if I'm the right person to recommend any books for this, but the one thing that came to mind was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, which is about a girl whose family are dying in a famine in China, and so she becomes her brother. And it is based on the true story, or the mythologically true story, you know, how countries have founding myths of the Hongwu emperor in the 14th century in China, who rose from famine to be emperor of the country, but first became a monk. She, dressed as a man, becomes a monk and then gets involved with the wars that are going on, and through brilliant tactics and the power of her mind, that's where the kind of fantasy element comes from, manages to defeat whole armies and outsmart other men. And it's also queer. If you are interested in lesbians in 14th century China, you might enjoy this book. And then finally, my friend Josh said, do you have a journalistic deep dive into women's pain and inequality in healthcare? And he asked this question. Oh, that might be upstairs too. Okay, he asked this question because his wife is Sarah Graham, who wrote Rebel Bodies, which is a book that I love and I gave 5 stars, so I would 100% recommend to you. It is, as he said, a journalistic deep dive into women's pain and inequality in healthcare, with a focus on the NHS and the UK health system, although it is relevant outside of this. It is trans-inclusive, it is really well researched, much more focused on interviewing experts in the field and activists around it and people experiencing it than it is kind of memoirish, which a lot of the books in this genre tend to be. It is very rigorous and engaging and well researched and well written, but yeah, he asked that because he wants me to shill his wife's book for him, so there you go. Those are all of the people who requested recommendations for me. If you didn't request one but you would like one, leave your comment in the comments and I will give you my best book recommendation. Thank you very much for watching. If you are new here, my name is Roisin. I will see you again very soon. Bye bye.